you speaking Taiwanese potentially, right? Mandarin, English, maybe some French. What have you learned along the way there for any tips and advice you could share with our audience?
So I find there's two ways to learn, right? There's one way, the programmable way, where each thing you figure out all the rules and you try to memorize those rules and then try to regurgitate, and it makes for a very difficult conversation, rather than you can actually memorize some sentences and then you actually figure out, oh, this is talking about me, this is the subject, or this thing right now is a noun.
What a cool engineering, logical approach to language.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the NG 英文 Show. My name is John Drummond, or Yang Haoen.
Hi, 大家好，欢迎回到 NG 英文，我是 Stephanie。今天的来宾 Chris 是 Labfront 的 CEO， 主要是在做会影响全球医疗保健生态的服务。他是一位创业家，并且热爱旅游。接下来就让我们来欢迎 Chris。
Today I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Chris. Chris is the co-founder and CEO of Labfront, doing some pretty cool things around the healthcare ecosystem globally. Chris is a world traveler, a lifelong learner, a serial entrepreneur, and so much more. So everyone, please welcome Chris.
Thank you.
What's up, dude? Chris, I must say, we started and I just felt like my brother from another mother, because you've lived in Thailand, you've traveled all over the world, you care so much about having impact and diving deep, and I appreciate that, man. So I'm happy to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too, John.
Yeah, so we got to connect through someone who's been on the show, Miss Vivian, if you guys all remember, and she was like, yo, listen, Chris, he started an ambulance service in Ethiopia. He's doing so much cool stuff in healthcare, kind of from a tech entrepreneurial perspective, and so I'm really looking forward to sharing more about you. So do you mind giving a little self-introduction, Chris?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Chris. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Labfront, and before that I spent a bunch of time in a couple of different places: Thailand, Ethiopia, Hawaii.
Hawaii, I forgot.
Hawaii, yeah, I got the surfing, man. Yeah, but mostly just always trying to find things that I can do that have scalable impact, and just figuring it out and taking it one step at a time.
I love it, man. Yeah, so I think the theme of today, guys, is going to be scalable impact. So maybe we should kind of unpack that. What does kind of scalable impact mean to you, Chris?
So for me, it's working on things that I think will make the world a better place, and not only just for myself, and not only at an individual level, which I did, and I tried that out when I was volunteering in Thailand, but really something that we build that can help, maybe hundreds or thousands or even millions of people, either directly or indirectly.
Yeah, man, it's so cool, guys. Yeah, having that scale, right? It goes up, can touch more people, affect more people in a positive way. Before we get to Labfront, can you share a little bit about the project you did with, was it your friend essentially in Ethiopia you met? Please share that.
Yeah, so Jordan, who's now a co-founder of mine, we were also track and field teammates in college at McGill. And so his roommate from college, Richard Kippelson, they had grown, he's Norwegian, but they'd grown up in Ethiopia. So Richard, when he had graduated from university, his dad, who is a surgeon, a very world famous surgeon, who'd been in Ethiopia working nonprofits, decided they were going to start a hospital in Ethiopia. And when they were starting the hospital, they needed someone trustworthy, and they didn't have anyone else that they knew other than Richard's like, well, Jordan just graduated. He has no job right now. Why don't we see if someone's willing to come to Ethiopia? And I remember Jordan telling me, he found out about it that Monday, and he packed his stuff and got rid of his apartment and everything. Was on a flight by Friday. And it was then spending a year in Ethiopia working on that project. So that's kind of how that part started. So the hospital side is a non-profit hospital that works to try to improve the entire emergency care in the country. So in Ethiopia, for the most part, most of the emergency surgery and a lot of the more technical work is done either in Kenya or Dubai. And what happens is that if that's the case for something like a car crash or something that's emergency, it's really hard to, hold off emergency and wait till you get shipped to Kenya or Dubai. And so what happens is the mortality rate was really, really high. So by building a world-class institution for emergency care, their goal was to significantly reduce the mortality rates from these kinds of very treatable, if you have the right time and the right resources, type of conditions. And so when they built the hospital and they were in the process of building a hospital, Jordan found out, because he's new to Ethiopia, that there was no ambulance system in the country. So it's hard to imagine living in Taiwan or living in the US growing up that there is no 911 or 119. There's nobody you call if there's a problem. That just doesn't exist. The government hasn't created a system. And not only that, there's actually no maps or street names. So if you actually go on Google Maps and check out, the capital city of Addis, which is over 10 million people reside, you'll see that almost 95% of the streets don't actually have names on them. So if you don't have a name on the street, how do you find someone? And you don't have an ambulance system, they're not going to be able to find you anyways. So it's just double whammy.
Wow. And so enter you and you and Jordan then kind of created a system that could it map with no street names, how did you end up doing that?
Yeah, so what we realized is that you can't just import a system from the US because they rely on infrastructure that you can't rely on in Ethiopia, for example, like street names, like maps, like things that you would expect to have in a system that they're, the constraint system that those things were designed under. So we had to reevaluate the entire situation and look at it from, what are we actually trying to do? What we're trying to do is get care from point A to wherever the care needs to be. That's what an ambulance system does. It doesn't actually, if you think about it, ambulance systems don't actually need to deliver people to the hospital. They just need to deliver care to the person. That's the point of the emergency service. And so using two principles, using that as the foundation, and then also there was a app at that point. It was a small little company just coming up. It's called Uber. You probably would have heard of it. So back then it was just starting to take off, and we're like, hey, they do stuff with GPS, and you can do geolocation using either GPS or cell towers, and potentially we could build a system that doesn't rely on maps, doesn't rely on addresses, but it still can get a GPS location. And so that's kind of that started.
Oh man, that's so cool. What an incredible real world problem you guys solved right there.
Chris 是透过之前的来宾 Vivian 介绍 Chris 在伊索比亚创立了一个救护车服务。那他曾经待过泰国、伊索比亚、夏威夷。那他一直都在找一些可扩展影响力 scalable impact 的事情做，并且一步一步的建立。其实他对于可扩展影响力的解读就是做一些让世界变得更好的事情。那来宾会接触伊索比亚的救护车服务，是因为他现在的合伙人 Jordan 是大学田径队 Track and Field 的队友 teammate。那他的室友 roommate Richard 就是一位挪威人，但他是在伊索比亚成长的。那 Richard 的父亲刚好就是一个知名的外科医生 surgeon， 那他一直来都在帮一些非营利组织。他当时想要在伊索比亚盖一间医院，只是当时他们找不到可以信任的人去执行，而刚好 Jordan 刚毕业还没找到工作，所以就决定去了。那后来花了1年的时间在弄这个专案。那这间医院是一个非营利医院，目的就是为了提升国家的急诊服务。因为其实当时比较紧急或是需要技术的手术都是要到肯亚跟杜拜去进行的，所以假设今天是车祸或是非常紧急的事情发生时，就得等到他们抵达肯亚或是杜拜才能进行手术，也因此他们的死亡率 mortality rate 提升很多。这就是为什么他们想要盖一间医院让死亡率大幅下降，因为其实很多时候只要是在对的时间并且用对的资源就能够痊愈。那当时 Jordan 也发现他们国内其实没有救护系统，而且他们也没有路也没有地图，再加上他们也没有系统可以记录人的资料，所以根本找不到人。这根本就是双重打击 double whammy， 因为他当时也不能直接将美国那一套系统带过去，因为他们根本没有可以依赖的基础建设 infrastructure， 比如说有系统路名，所以他们得重新审视 reevaluate 整个情况。他们就开始思考，救护车的目的其实就是把病患的需要的照顾带过去，不一定要带到医院，因为只要能够解决病患的问题就好了。他们就是用这个概念当基础。那当时 Uber 的 App 才刚开始，他们就有用到 GPS， 所以他们想到或许可以用 GPS 跟手机信号塔 cell towers 当做地理定位 geolocation， 这样就不用依赖地图跟地址了。这就是他们的开始。我们继续来听接下来的专访吧。
And so then fast forward now to Labfront. What are you guys doing with Labfront?
Yeah, so that experience, I'll back up a little bit. That experience for us was the first time that we built a real, like something real that could really affect, more than a few people, and it's a continuously sustainable system. Actually, until this year, from 2015 until just recently this year, it was been in operation. Recently, we've decided that due to there's the civil war in Ethiopia, and it's just a little bit too dangerous right now for our staff, that system is being shut down. But overall, it was operating fully self-sustaining, pays for itself, and covered. It was the only ambulance system that covered over 10,000 people in Ethiopia. So that system for us sounded like a success, and it was super fun to do. So as a first time, and that wasn't really an entrepreneurial. That was more just we're just building a project for fun, and nonprofit organization, everything just as a side project. So when Jordan and I finished that, we were thinking about what's the next thing. Do we want to build something ourselves? So or could we build something now that we had built something before? Maybe we can actually do something else. So that kind of led us in the journey of deciding, okay, maybe we should try a startup. But at that point, that was in 2016, and we didn't have any money. We didn't really know how the startup ecosystem works, so everything was new. So we started just by building out like a little small consultancy, getting paid first so that we can build up a team, and over the 3-4 years, we eventually built up a team, and then decided okay, now we're ready, we can start to build a startup. And so now we're working on Labfront. So Labfront's a startup, focuses on health research, basically. What we realized is, especially with COVID-19, how important scientific research is. However, scientific research is extremely underfunded. There are very few products in built for scientific research. And if you think about all the new workplace tools that we have, like Loom, Zoom, Slack, and those aren't even new, but there's literally thousands of them popping up. All those to optimize efficiency in the workplace. There's none of those in scientific research, and scientific research is such an important field. How come there aren't any tools? Well, it's kind of due to the markets. It's kind of due to how investors invest and how startups look at the market. But we thought, well, even though there's no one else looking at this, we know how important it is, and we should build something to help make that better. So basically, Labfront took the mission to let's make science easier. Let's use technology to make it cheaper. Let's just completely reshape the way that science can be done, democratize research, and set that as our goal and figure out how we do that. So that's kind of how we started Labfront.
I love the way your brain works, man. We were talking a little bit off air about the concept of kind of this scientific research, and Labfront being that a lot of times you were mentioning if you're in a scientific study, a health study, you would have to maybe go to the hospital or go to these clinics, and it's a pain, right? You're asking patients to come in, fill out forms, journal, do all these things. It can become very unreliable and very kind of taxing, and people are like, I'm over it. But you're saying now with the tech that is focusing on wearables, so maybe, my audience knows Apple Watches, right? There's Fitbit, there's Whoop, there's all sorts of things. Now, this can help pair with Labfront to make it easier to do scientific research from home. Is that the idea there?
Exactly. Originally, everyone has to come into the hospital or into the lab to do research. But what happens is, most projects don't just happen that day. They occur over weeks or months or even years. And what happens between each hospital visit? Basically, there's almost no data. And if there is data, it's usually written down or it's in a journal. And there's so many things that can happen. People forget. And that's actually part of the massive cost. So what we decided and figured out, in this direction of we're remote, is we could bring the lab to the participants to their house by using wearable devices, and wearable devices can capture not only better data but also higher resolution and continuous. You can have it 24/7 data over months. That would be literally impossible. You can't keep someone in the hospital for 24/7 for months. That doesn't work. So it completely changes the way that the research can be done, accuracy of data, and as well the effectiveness of the project, and make it a lot cheaper.
Seems like you're solving a lot of problems with that right there. Yeah, that remote data capture, guys. I think that's just, man, that's making my brain go right now, because you're like you said, if you sleep with it, for example, you could have 24-hour health data and be able to potentially predict cancer or, oh man, all these early stage things that people will just like, I don't want to go to the doctor, you know.
That's exactly what we're trying to build. So the whole point about Labfront and the reason behind what we're trying to do as a company is that healthcare is a problem. We don't really have a healthcare system. I think we have a sick care system. It's like there's so many things wrong. Yeah, and so we're trying to change that and focus on prevention, focuses on all the things that happen before you get sick, diagnosing this, or, you know, maybe it's not disease, maybe it's pre-diabetes or it's pre-diabetes, right? You're on the wrong direction. We can change that, and we can figure that out using wearable devices because they're much more sensitive, and you can get exactly what you're saying. Every single night's data it can be a sleep study, and, you know, rather than doing one sleep study in your entire lifetime, you can do 365 in 1 year just by wearing a device. So
oh man, it's so cool too, because I think about a sleep study. I love sleep and sleep science, and you know, a lot of times you have to go into the clinic, sleep in potentially like an MRI or an EKG system. You know, you're on edge, right? But if you just have a little ring, like, and you're just sleeping normally in your home, man, I'm so thrilled. Well, Chris, I'm so grateful that you are doing what you're doing, and I'm really wishing you continued success.
当时那个救护车服务是他们第一次做到能够帮助多人的系统。从2005年到今年，其实一直都有在营运，只是因为伊索比亚的内战 Civil War， 所以为了员工们的安全，他们就关闭了这一间公司。在他们眼里，其实是非常成功的一个案例，而且非常好玩。但当时因为他把这个当作是一个玩乐的项目，所以结束之后，其实来宾跟他的合伙人就在思考，是不是要创造一个属于他们的东西。所以他们就先建立了一个顾问公司 consultant company， 然后赚到钱之后开始建立团队。那现在新创公司 Labfront 主要是在研究健康，尤其新冠之后，他们发现科学研究有多重要，只是科学研究有严重的资金不足 underfunded 的问题。Labfront 开始的原因就是希望可以让科学变得更简单，用科技让科学变得更便宜，以及改变整个科学圈研究的方式。那在录音前，其实来宾有跟 John 提到，科学研究其实很多时候是需要病患到实验室或是医院，那他们要填写资料，还要做一些检测，但这就很麻烦，所以他们想要透过穿戴装置 wearables， 像是大家熟悉的 Apple Watch， 然后跟 Labfront 结合做研究。那因为其实做科学研究通常不是当天就会有结果的，有可能需要几周、几个月甚至几年的时间。那其实他们最大的成本就是他们没有去实验室或是医院的那段时间，因为中间的变数太大了，有可能是用手写记录下来的，但也会遗漏很多东西，所以他们想要透过穿戴装置收集更完整的资料，这样不只能够改变研究的模式，资料也会更加准确 accurate， 而且能够省钱。那 remote data capture 远端资料截取可以24小时收集资料。我们继续来听接下来的专访吧。
Well, do you think we could switch gears a little bit to talk about kind of your story with Taiwan?
Sure.
What's up? How'd you get here?
Yeah, so my family is Taiwanese. My parents born and raised in Taiwan, but I personally they moved to Boston when before I was born, and I was born and raised in the U.S. But every summer, I think the story is a lot of ABCs. We came to Taiwan every summer except for SARS, and spent basically a month, 2 months with the grandparents. And I got to know a little bit about Taiwan and, you know, fall in love with the food, of course. That's the first thing, right? Didn't love how hot it was, especially during the summer. So that was definitely like one of the things. But yeah, overall, like, you know, had that good impression. And my experience basically was I went from when I was volunteering in Thailand. My first job outside, my first real job was at HTC, which, you know, at that time was one of the top smartphone makers and personally one of my favorite companies at that point. I was a huge fan of their products. And as someone that studied electrical engineering, I wanted to see like how our products made, because I technically have an engineering, you know, background, but I don't know how to actually build things. So I joined the team at HTC in studio engineering, you know, formerly Magic Labs, and we were able to, you know, see how that happened and, you know, how the magic is created, kind of thing. And from that experience, you know, that happened to be the same time period that Jordan reached out for the Ethiopia project, and, you know, sort of started my journey in Taiwan.
So cool, man. And we got to connect that I shot a commercial for the HTC U11 phone, I think might have been right after your time there, or right before.
Right after.
Right? Yeah, right after you left. But small little world there. Very, very cool. And so, how has language played a part in your life now? You know, you've been in the U.S. for a long time. You're in Taiwan working with a tech company. Has Mandarin and English now kind of interwoven nicely in your life, or where would you say you're at with all that?
So language is something really important to me. I grew up speaking Chinglish with my family, right? Mostly English, but with Chinese mixed in, and they would speak mostly Chinese with English mixed in. Something that is part of my heritage, my culture. But also, when I went to college, I lived in Quebec, lived in Montreal, so, it's French speaking. Back then, I didn't have any, I would say, any real understanding of how to learn languages, and I kind of learned it the traditional way, trying to rote memorization. When I later moved to Thailand and started picking up Thai and then learning it, it was the first time for me to actually learn a foreign language, but actually just learn it fully myself. I didn't really take courses or anything, but I just learned it from a very practical standpoint, and that started my own theory and my own ideas around how to learn languages. And that from there, new things, new languages, it's new cultures. I feel like you have to understand some of the language. You need to that's the nuance in the language is really also in the culture, and it's also how people see things. So for me, my team speaks. We work in English for most meetings, but I speak a lot of Mandarin with. A lot of my team members, Mandarin is definitely their first language. So we have a lot of Mandarin as well. The problem for me has been that since I do a lot of talking, and then not everyone, not everyone speaks as much, so I haven't gotten to improve my vocabulary as much as I'm very confident with the very childish vocabulary that I use. But I'm very good at speaking it, but it still sounds like a fifth grader is telling you what you need to do. But I think the listening part is all right. So
I love that, man. What a picturing you as the boss, but given the fifth grade orders is dope. But it's cool, man. It's really a language exchange, a cultural exchange at your company, and I just love hearing my friends that are building like that. And are you guys thinking about hiring ever?
Yeah, so we're actually going to be looking to expand the Taiwan team here and enter the Taiwan market, because most of what we do right now is all in Europe and in the US. That's the majority of our market, but we also want to support here locally. But the part about language exchange is pretty funny, because we have a couple of our researchers. They actually spent time at Harvard in my dad's lab. But because they had so many other Taiwanese or Chinese coworkers, they spoke less English, but at coming to our office they actually worked on their English the most. So it's pretty funny.
That's so cool, man. And yet it's a full circle right there. So they were your dad's students essentially, and then now you guys are all working together.
Exactly.
I love that, man. Such a cool little full circle right there. Any tips or advice for your own language as you develop that thesis you were saying about for your? Because now, dude, you came in here, you were speaking Thai to me, and my brain was like,
it's been a while, right?
Dude, I was like, I forgot even how to say nitnoi. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, you speaking Taiwanese potentially, right? Mandarin, English, maybe some French, Thai. What have you learned along the way there? For any tips and advice you could share with our audience.
Sure. I don't speak Taiwanese, but okay, it's all right.
Sorry.
It's all good. I want to learn a bit, so for me, it was practical learning. So just speak the things, just the things that you need to learn. Ignore most of the things that you want to memorize, like what people usually teach you, which are sports and different fruits and animals. Sometimes you'll use it, but it's less likely that you'll use it. On the other hand, just learning a couple things, piecing them together, what I found was there's a cadence to language, and even if you memorize things as an entire sentence and then you get to use it, what happens is your brain naturally will pick up on the patterns. So I find there's two ways to learn, right? There's one way, the programmatical way, where you each thing you figure out all the rules and you try to memorize those rules and then try to regurgitate, and it makes for a very difficult conversation and hard for, to really speak because you're trying to focus too much on the rules rather than you can actually memorize some sentences, and then you actually figure out as you add more sentences, you actually start figuring out, like, your brain naturally pattern recognizes and figures out, like, oh, this is talking about me, this is the subject, and this thing right now is a noun, and you might not know that, but you actually do know it, and that's for me how Thai really happens. It's like I learned a bunch of sentences and I kept on using them, and then you start to use them in different variations, and every time you add it, it's like you don't add one word adds like hundreds of sentences to your vocabulary because now you know how to use it in multiple different ways. So
what a cool engineering, like, logical approach to language. You got a great mind, my friend.
来宾的父母都是台湾人，那他们在他出生之前就搬去美国波士顿住了，但他每个暑假都会回来台湾，大概花1到2个月的时间跟爷爷奶奶相处。那他爱上了台湾的食物，但是非常不喜欢夏天的天气。那他当时第一份正式的工作其实就是在曾经非常受欢迎的 HTC 公司。那他非常喜欢他们的商品跟公司，也因为他有机械工程的背景，所以他进入了他们的工程团队，看到商品是如何产出的。那其实语言对于来宾来说一直都是蛮重要的，他大部分的时间还是用英文居多，但还是会夹杂一些中文，而他家人就是相反的。那他其实在大学的时候也曾经在加拿大的魁北克住过，那里的语言其实是法文。那他是从一个非常实际的观点 practical standpoint 去学习，他认为学语言的细微差别 nuance 就是他们的文化跟他们的观点。那他的团队在开会的时候大部分的时间还是用英文，但因为来宾还是会以中文为主，因为毕竟员工的母语大部分都是中文。可是来宾认为他的词汇并没有增加，因为他对于他自己小学的中文表达方式非常有信心，那听力方面也没有问题。那来宾的公司也有打算增财，因为目前大部分的业务都是在欧洲跟美国，他希望可以支持台湾。来宾会给大家学习语言的建议就是先学你平常会使用到的词汇，可以不用那么重视那些平常需要死背的东西，像是运动、动物之类的，因为其实说实话用到的几率真的不高。他认为学习语言有个韵律 cadence， 如果你背句型的话，其实你的大脑会抓到模式，所以有2种学习方式，一种就是程序化的 programmable， 那就是说要背所有的文法规则，那这样说话的时候其实比较难去想，因为你要一直想规则。那另一种方式就是背句型，然后自己拼凑，因为其实你背越多句子的话，你大脑会弄得越清楚它的意思。像他在学泰文的时候，就是先学一些比较常用到的句型，然后再开始延伸变化 variations。 我们继续来听接下来的专访吧。
A question I'd love to end the show with, though, Chris, is if you could go back and talk to a younger Chris, would there be any advice you give yourself about language, scaling, impact, anything?
I think I would love to not have been so afraid to fail. I think it took me a long time to realize that failure is part of the process and not look at it as failure as an end-all be-all. I think it's something that is prevalent in Asian culture, that failure is hidden and we kind of like airbrush it, everything's Instagrammed basically, right? It's all cleaned up, but you don't see that the hard work that would come behind it, and all that. So I think that's what I would have told myself. I don't know if I would have listened, but I would have tried to tell myself that.
Yes, I love it. Very great advice. Don't forget, Instagram is not always life, friends. There's lots that goes on beneath the surface. The iceberg analogy. Chris, you're a legend. Thank you for coming in and joining us on the NG English Show.
Chris 会给年轻自己的建议就是不要害怕失败，因为他花了很久的时间才搞清楚失败也是过程中的一环，而且也不要把失败当作一切的结束。因为他认为其实在亚洲社会中蛮流行 prevalent 把失败隐藏起来，什么东西都要被美化 airbrushed， 有点像是大家在 IG 上看到的都是光鲜亮丽，但是实际上是不是这样很难说。那虽然说他不知道年轻的自己会不会听取这个建议，但这就是他想说的。那我们就谢谢今天的来宾 Chris。
Where can people find more about you online? I feel like you might have some new fans.
Yeah, so Labfront, you can be found at on our YouTube channel. Just search Labfront, and as well as the Facebook page. And for myself, I have a LinkedIn. I don't really use other socials, so it's linkedin.com/in/Christopher-Peng, Peng.
Thanks for joining us, my man. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.
Peace. All right. Well, that is our NG 英文 show for today. We hope everyone enjoyed listening to that. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now Spotify. You can search NG 英文, or you can search on IG NG English ICRT. And don't forget to tune in every Wednesday morning from 6:30 to 7 and Wednesday night from 9 to 9:30. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye-bye.